Today's podcast is brought to you by AlleyRepair.com. Don't leave your skee-ball machines lying around collecting dust in the basement. Let AlleyRepair.com bring those machines back to life. High-quality workmanship for your skee-ball playing needs. Contact AlleyRepair.com today. Hello, everybody. I know it's been a little while since we've done one of our Fro Life Wrestling podcasts. Having issues with some of the technical side of things, but we want to get these out to you anyways. We're going to back up a couple days because of all the issues we had. We didn't get to cover some of the cool things that went down this week and some of the historical stuff. I'm going to start this episode with the day in pro wrestling history. I had intended on doing this episode on February 6th. It's actually a very big day. I'm one of those guys who remembers certain dates throughout the history of wrestling, and they mean a whole lot to me. And one on February 6th was a big deal. Is that on that day in 1990, that was the day that Sting got kicked out of the Four Horsemen. And to set the stage for you, I can remember being a young guy, and I was really, my family didn't have cable, so we didn't have TBS, and back then they had the Clash of the Champions, and Clash of Champions 10 was going to originate from Corpus Christi, Texas. I remember calling up a friend who wasn't even a wrestling fan, telling him how important it was for me to watch this show, and I had to see it, and came over to his place. We watched the show. It was an amazing show. That was the night that they kicked off the show with Ric Flair and Arn and Ole Anderson and Sting, the Four Horsemen, coming to the ring, and then letting Sting know that after he won, for those who know anything about the history and evolution of Sting's character, in 1989 Starrcade, Sting won a tournament, a round-robin tournament against Lex Luger, the Great Muta, and Ric Flair to earn a shot at Ric Flair's NWA World Heavyweight Championship, despite the fact that they were in the Horsemen together shortly after that pay-per-view. And this was the night where they all came together, and Ole Anderson let Sting know that he was getting kicked out of the Horsemen. There was a whole back and forth exchange where they warned him, and Ric Flair ended up getting physical and telling him he tried to tell him that he bought him some time, do the smart thing, smarten up, get out of this business, get rid of the contract and all that. And it led to what was supposed to be the main event of the show. Was supposed to be Sting, Ric Flair, and Arn Anderson going against the Dragon Master, the Great Muta, and Buzz Sawyer. But that ended up not coming to fruition because they kicked him out of the Horsemen. Ole Anderson stepped into Sting's place at that pay-per-view, or that TV show. And when that happened, towards the end of the match, Sting came charging out. It was a six-man tag team cage match. Sting ran to the ring, dove up to the cage, and ended up slamming his knee into the cage and blew out his knee, which took him out of being able to compete against Flair for the world title. And the thought was they originally were planning on giving Sting the world championship in February at the pay-per-view he was supposed to challenge Ric Flair at. Thankfully, in my opinion, this was a good thing that he got hurt, because what ended up happening was they put Lex Luger into that position, who was actually a heel at the time. Put Lex Luger in to challenge Ric Flair. Luger doesn't win the title. They get a few months to really build up this Sting-Ric Flair thing, and that was the year in 1990 where Sting, at the Great American Bash, came out in his red, white, and blue gear and finally beat Ric Flair for the World Heavyweight Championship in what was really a career-defining moment. So, kind of a bad thing for Sting in respect of getting the injury, but a great thing for his career longevity because he ended up becoming world champion in what I think was a much more dramatic way. Also on that card, the Steiner brothers defeated Doom, which made Doom take off their masks, which were revealed to be Ron Simmons and Butch Reed, which was not fooling anybody. Everybody could tell just by looking at them. And then the one that I think sometimes gets overlooked is that was where Cactus Jack went against Mil Mascaras, and Mil Mascaras does the thing where he kicks Jack off the apron, and Jack falls and hits his head. Mick Foley ends up losing a tooth, and it's one of the famous times where he got a legit injury during a match. He got up and kept doing the match, finished the match, and the match itself wasn't all that memorable, but when you look back at Mick Foley's career, that was one of those times where he got one of those heavy-duty injuries, and you can look back and say, I remember seeing that. So that was also the night that the Road Warriors were laid out with chairs by Teddy Long's tag team, the New Skyscrapers, which were comprised of Dan Spivey and Mark Callis, who eventually would become The Undertaker. So for people who are fans of The Undertaker, you know, I say this every episode now, pop on YouTube, look up Road Warriors versus Skyscrapers Clash of Champions and check that match out if you want to see The Undertaker before he was The Undertaker in a high-profile tag team match against the Road Warriors. Also on this day, 1986, Shiro Koshinaka won the first IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship, which may not seem like a big deal because I don't think anybody listening to this podcast probably remembers who Shiro Koshinaka is. But the point I'm bringing this up for is that there are countless people who are insanely talented cruiserweights who originate in Japan or go to Japan, tour Japan, and have brought us some of the best entertainment we have now. Chris Jericho, Chris Benoit, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, Owen Hart, all people who went through the system of New Japan Pro Wrestling and trying to go for that IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship. More modern stars, Neville, at the time called Fergal Devitt, now Finn Balor, people like that. Even nowadays with people like Kushida and just a whole host of talent over there, Kota Ibushi. These people have all been going over there fighting for this IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship and have some of them gone on to really amazing singles careers on the biggest stage in the world, at WrestleMania for some of them. AJ Styles was over there fighting at one point, stuff like that. So when you think about the historical importance of the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship and the way wrestling has evolved from where it used to be just only a big man's game to now where smaller cruiserweight people really can get over at a main event level, the IWGP Junior Heavyweight Championship is a big part of that. I'm going to move on. You'll notice that this episode moves relatively quickly because I recorded this thing 3 times already and it keeps going too long, so then it won't let me upload for some reason. Gotta love my service. Thank you, Spreaker. Anyways, to the news for this episode, Shinsuke Nakamura messed up the knee during the NXT San Antonio show. They were concerned he was going to need surgery. Not going to need surgery, but we don't have a timetable on his return. Hopefully sooner than later, because I would love to see him at least in the Andre the Giant Battle Royal at Mania, if not in a higher profile match. WWE signed Dana Warrior this week as a brand ambassador, which I think is a cool thing for Dana to keep her husband's legacy alive. I always find it kind of interesting. They seem to be doing so much for the Warrior family with all these other talents who've died over the last several years, really not getting the same kind of treatment, but still cool that somebody like the Ultimate Warrior and his family are able to contribute in some way and honor his memory. Hideo Itami is now healthy and ready to go. The question remains, do you bring him to NXT or you put him to the main roster? And the reason this is a question for me is that WWE has invested a lot of money into his character and has gotten virtually no return on their investment. So at some point you want to put him into the main roster so you can get something back from him before, God forbid, he gets hurt again, which is the concern with him. He's obviously had a couple injuries that have taken up the better part of the last 2 years of his wrestling career. So at some point you just really gotta take a chance on this guy, bring him up to the roster and see what he can do, is what it is. Just for the record, because I get questions about, sources and things like that. I'm not a backstage secret mole learning WWE news and things like that. I bring my information from a conglomerate of websites, and I want to put that out there. If you're noticing that a lot of the stories are similar, it's because most of the media outlets are reporting the same stories. WrestleZone.com, eWrestlingNews.com, Cage Side Seats, The Bleacher Report, Wrestling Observer, Pro Wrestling Illustrated's website, Wrestling Inc. Like all these sites report mostly the same stories in somewhat different ways from time to time. My goal is to bring these things together into one platform so you don't have to search 95 sites to get all the news. You can come right here, get it all at one spot, and not have to sit there and click a whole bunch of times on your computer. So I hope you appreciate that, and I hope I'm not treading on anybody's toes on those sites because they're all amazing. I really thank all those sites for everything that they contribute to the wrestling industry, giving everybody the news they need to hear. Other news, Jack Sabre Jr. is going to be taking on Michael Elgin at Evolve 81. This is huge because Elgin left Ring of Honor recently. He's been in New Japan doing a ton of stuff in New Japan, but he really is somebody who needs to be on American television in some fashion. Evolve 81 is on March 31st. This will be a great match between Zack Sabre Jr., who really should have gone to WWE, but they didn't give him a good enough long-term contract, and Michael Elgin, who I actually hope ends up in WWE at some point. And with the working relationship that Evolve has with WWE, it'd be nice to see that happen sooner rather than later. The only problem I have is Michael Elgin, for as stocky as he is, he's really short. If you ever see the guy, there's a match from New Japan where he goes against Billy Gunn, and Billy Gunn is never, in my opinion, looked like a very big talent, but next to Michael Elgin, he looks like a giant because Elgin's so short. He's a stocky guy, buff guy, he can do all the physical power stuff, but he's just so short. It's almost like looking at Samoa Joe and comparing him to Taz. Like they're not big people. Taz was a midget, and then Samoa Joe's like the big version of Taz. That's kind of the way I feel about Elgin. He's a midget, compared to a lot of these other people out there. So take a look at that on March 31st if you get a chance. Big announcement for TNA Wrestling. They've made a working arrangement with Pro Wrestling Noah out of Japan, which is a smaller promotion in Japan who produces quite a bit of talent that eventually find their way to All Japan or New Japan. And, really it's almost like the NXT of Japan, like creating talents that eventually will blossom elsewhere. So it'll be cool to see this working arrangement. All the times in the past that there's been deals between Japan and TNA, they've been pretty fruitful. So hopefully this will be too. When we go back to WWE for a second, two things. One, there's now talk of Triple H going against Shane McMahon at WrestleMania instead of against Seth Rollins because of the injury, which I actually like that storyline a lot more. Don't get me wrong, I really want to see the Seth Rollins Triple H thing, but I don't want to rush Seth Rollins back for the possibility of actually hurting him worse. He's the future of the company. He's one of the franchise players. I really don't want to rush him back just so he can get hurt in a meaningless match at WrestleMania that we already know is going to happen. Take your time, bring him back within due time, and let him have the match of the caliber that Seth Rollins and Triple H could put on. The Triple H Shane McMahon thing, really, there's some real life heat there, stemming back to 2012 when Shane McMahon pitched coming back to the company and taking over full creative control, which of course really irritated Triple H. And there's been long documented issues between Shane and Stephanie over sibling rivalry over control of the company to begin with. So this would have a built-in, legitimate, organic frustration between these two people, antagonists and protagonists. So it'd be a good thing. So I'm hoping they go that direction for a couple of reasons. One, don't rush Seth back. Two, free up AJ Styles for a legitimate match at Mania. Please do not make him wrestle against Shane McMahon. It is such a waste. So that's my 2 cents on the Seth Rollins topic. They are saying he's considered to be a go for WrestleMania. That's relatively quick if you ask me, but they're saying that his torn MCL, which they confirmed on Raw, is a 6 to 8 week injury, and that brings him back literally days before the pay-per-view, which is a good thing if you really want to see him at the show. I would love to see him at the show. I just don't really want to see him in a high-profile match and rush himself back, but we'll see how that shakes down. We're expecting them to continue to give updates over the next several weeks. I'm going to try to fly through the Raw recap and SmackDown recaps because I don't want this thing to run long either. With Raw, the show opens with Stephanie McMahon in the ring with Mick Foley, and they bring out Samoa Joe to sign his contract. He gives Foley some attitude because Foley said he's been a fan of his for 18 years, and he talks about how if he was such a fan, why did it take this one other guy to bring him in finally? Opening segment. I've been saying it for a couple weeks now. There's too many speaking segments on Raw, but there was segment number 1. They go to their first match, which is Bayley versus Nia Jax. Decent match. Actually had me believing Bayley had a shot to do something good with Nia Jax. Made her believable if she could beat Nia Jax. Then the interference from Charlotte leading to Jax getting the victory. Perfect ending for the match. Builds Bayley and builds Nia Jax. To me, it seems clear Nia Jax is walking out of WrestleMania as the women's champion. Braun Strowman takes on 4 independent little booked guys. I have a problem with the match. I get why you're putting 4 guys against Braun Strowman because you're trying to build him up to be a beast, but if you really want to build him up and if you're okay burying certain talents that you already have on a roster, when was the last time that we saw people like, the shining stars in any kind of important thing, or Bo Dallas? Grab 4 of your guys that you've just absolutely buried on the roster whose reputation really doesn't matter. Throw some Curtis Axel out there. Put the 4 of them against Braun Strowman. They're names that people recognize. It makes the match seem more believable and more has more appeal when you can actually relate to the people who are in the ring, and it puts him over even bigger. Instead, they put him against 4 people that none of us are ever going to know any of their names unless you're like an uber fan who needs to know every jobber in the history of wrestling. So to me, the match was pointless. He goes into the back, he's screaming at Mick Foley how he wants bigger competition. They book a match with him and Roman Reigns at Fastlane. The only reason I like that is it's clear that means that'll end that feud so that Reigns can be freed up for The Undertaker, and Lord knows what they're going to do with Braun Strowman at WrestleMania, so we'll have to wait and see. They go to their next segment is the Akira Tozawa versus Drew Gulak match. Tozawa is amazing, and he's over big already. It seems like of the 205 Live people, he's one of the ones who's generating some real buzz. At the end of the match, when Tozawa wins, Kendrick comes out for a handshake, obviously leading to something there. We'll have to wait and see how that shakes out. Then here's where I'm going to start getting frustrated. So they go to their second speaking segment, which is a Chris Jericho and Kevin Owens segment. Love the part where Jericho puts Tom Brady on the list. That's funny as sin. And then they talk about Chris Jericho proposes a WrestleMania main event match of friends for the US and the world, the Universal Championship. I like that they teased that and that Owens didn't reject it right away. It sounds pretty cool. Enter Bill Goldberg. Goldberg walks out, puts in, the coolest part of Bill Goldberg coming out is putting himself on the list. That was awesome. He accepts Brock Lesnar's challenge for Mania, challenges Kevin Owens for Fastlane, tells him, the reason you've been the longest running Universal Champion is because you haven't faced me. Love that Chris Jericho jumped in and accepts the challenge on behalf of Kevin Owens. I love that, since Owens did that to Jericho only a couple weeks ago. So that wrapped up that. So now that's your second verbal segment of the show. They go right into their third. After the commercial break, Kevin Owens and Chris Jericho are backstage having an argument about whether or not Chris Jericho has Kevin Owens back. So now you got 3 speaking segments already. Then it goes to Gallows and Anderson in the ring. They defend their titles against Cesaro and Sheamus. They have Enzo and Cass out at ringside. The match ends when Gallows kicks Enzo in the head and Big Cass responds. You could see everything formulating the way things have been going with the tag team division, but it was cool the way they did this match. It builds for something bigger in the future. They had the New Day go over the Shining Stars in what is clearly a completely wasted match. And here's why. The New Day are so over, there is nobody on the Raw roster, including the champions or the other 2 teams that were in the previous match, that can come anywhere close to them in terms of fan appeal and talent. So what do you do with the New Day? This is why a few weeks ago when I was fantasy booking WrestleMania, I said to move New Day over to SmackDown to challenge American Alpha. It's fresh, it's new, it gives New Day a new layer, and it gives them something to shoot for. Right now, they don't want to put them right back in the title picture, so they're just kind of toiling against crap teams like Shining Stars, instead of going and making an impact. We go to another spoken segment, Chris Jericho and Kevin Owens again making up and being best friends. This is the 4th segment, and the 3rd one with Owens and Jericho. They make up, they're going to be buddies, they got each other's back, this and that. We go to the announcement of the Rock and Roll Express being inducted into the Hall of Fame. Very cool. I'm so happy for Ricky and Robert, even though if you go online and look up shoot videos, you can hear Ricky and Robert bash WWE constantly. I'm kind of surprised they put him in after all the stuff they said about him in different interviews. Then you go to another Jericho Owens moment, not a speaking segment. This is the match. Chris Jericho is going to defend the U.S. title against Sami Zayn. He ends up beating Sami Zayn after Kevin Owens gives him a super kick to the face while the referee's distracted. Cool match. I don't know why you have him beat Zayn unless you're going to build towards a match where you're going to give the title to Zayn, but whatever. At the end of the day, it's the multiple times seeing Jericho and Owens on the same show makes me feel like you don't have enough talent to fill that time with anybody else, which is nonsense because you've got an entire roster full of people that could be taking up more time. We go to our 5th speaking moment. Aries interviewing Neville about, his view of the 205 Live division and the fatal 5-way match that's going to take place on 205 Live between Noam Dar and Tony Nese and TJ Perkins, Jack Gallagher and Cedric Alexander. And they all take their time to come out and they all shoot their mouth off. And then it leads to a 6-man tag team match, which has Neville walk out on his team and the babyface is picking up the win. Whatever. It fills time. It builds 205 Live. It's obvious they're trying to really give that division a chance to grow. I think they're going to have to do more of that to make it be successful. They go to segment number 6 of interview time, and this is the 4th one of Owens and Jericho, where they talk about the Festival of Friendship, which you could have crammed 4 episodes of their backstage bickering into one and have more TV time for other talents or other matches. But we'll see what the Festival of Friendship turns into next week. Should be fun. We go to the main event. Roman Reigns, Samoa Joe, killer match back and forth, typical high spots for both guys. No muscle buster, which I would love to see how Joe would get him into a muscle buster, but then Braun Strowman coming out at the end of the match, interfering, costing Roman Reigns the match. You had to expect Joe to win his first match, otherwise it's pointless bringing him up to the main roster. Don't necessarily like him going over Roman Reigns so quickly, but hey, whatever, it'll work. So that was Raw. So let's move on to SmackDown. SmackDown, in my opinion, this week was a better show than Raw. You have Daniel Bryan come out for his in-ring segment. You have a back and forth thing going on with him and The Miz again. I love this conversation about The Miz telling him, why do you come out here? Why are you here? You can't wrestle anymore. And, Daniel Bryan responding with, well, not being able to wrestle never stopped you from coming out here. So I was dying just listening to the banter back and forth. Baron Corbin comes out, talks about The Miz talks too much. Ambrose comes out. Styles comes out. Everybody's out there shooting their mouth off about why they're going to win at the Elimination Chamber. It leads to a fatal 4-way match, which for me, one of the highlights of WWE television this week, seeing Baron Corbin pick up the clean win in a fatal 4-way ahead of the Elimination Chamber. Baron Corbin has serious potential for the future. They need to build him just the right way, and this was a good way, even if he doesn't win at the Chamber, which obviously I expect Bray Wyatt to win that, but even if he doesn't win at the Chamber, he looks strong coming out of that pay-per-view. He picks up momentum heading into WrestleMania. I could easily see him and Ambrose going at it for the Intercontinental title. I don't think that'll happen, but I could see that being a legitimate storyline. Nikki Bella and Natalya, backstage segment, back and forth arguing over their match that's going to be booked for the Elimination Chamber. Thank God we'll get this match over with. I'm tired of hearing those two. I expect Nikki Bella to win that match, but we'll see. Dolph Ziggler comes out and faces Apollo Crews. Crews gets the great win over Ziggler. I feel like this was completely rushed. The whole feud has been just funky and bizarre. I thought they would hold off Crews and Ziggler for the pay-per-view, but then after the match, Ziggler attacks Crews. This is a total waste of time. Kalisto comes out again. He gets laid out with a chair. It leads to the match being booked for the Elimination Chamber of Dolph Ziggler in a handicap match against Apollo Crews and Kalisto. Kind of weird to see the bad guy on the short-handed side of a handicap match, but whatever. So we have that set up for the pay-per-view. Then we go into a segment where they have Mickie James, Alexa Bliss, Naomi, and Becky Lynch come out signing their contracts. Back and forth banter ends with some high spots by Naomi. It is what it is. I guess they're trying to make the women look like the men when they do a contract signing. It was okay. Wasn't anything good. Nothing special. They have this interesting match with American Alpha, Slater and Rhino, and Breezango acting like they're baby faces, going against the Usos, the Ascension, and the Vaudevillains. Again, this is another one you probably wouldn't hear me say often, but I loved this match, not because the match was good, the match was horrific, but the end of the match sees the Ascension pick up a clean victory. The Ascension have been completely misused since they came to the main roster. Cool thing to see them actually get a moment in the spotlight. Main event, Cena versus Orton. Cool match. We've seen it 4,000 times. Bray Wyatt gets involved, attacks Cena. Harper comes out. It actually almost looked like Harper was going to rejoin the Wyatt family. I almost expected him to do a stare down with Bray and then attack Cena. Didn't happen. Instead, he attacks Bray. He gets knocked out of the ring. Bray gets knocked out of the ring. He was going to put the Sister Abigail on Cena. And just this whole back and forth thing resulting in John Cena picking up the win over Randy Orton. So you bury the Royal Rumble winner on free television at SmackDown, who's supposed to go to WrestleMania main event. Whatever. I don't get it. Of all times, I don't like schmaz endings, but there should have been a schmaz ending in this match. Waste of time. But anyways, this week I want to throw out something really cool. Somebody last week in the last episode really liked this look back match thing I did. Go to YouTube. This week I have one for you that is very special. Go to YouTube and do a search for The Punisher versus Steve Williams, and then the letters USWA. For those who don't know what USWA is, it was the United States Wrestling Association. It was the name given to a promotion Jerry Lawler was a huge part of. Jerry Jarrett, Jeff Jarrett's father. This is what ended up sucking in all the talent from World Class when they were going out of business. And the match, The Punisher versus Steve Williams, is The Undertaker under a mask versus Stone Cold Steve Austin before he lost all his hair. And very cool match to watch these two get in the ring back when they were really young in the business. So check that out. That's our look back match for this episode. Remember, if you have any questions or anything you want me to look into, or you're looking for me to do commentary or fantasy booking for, post your questions on the YouTube feed for this podcast episode. By all means, please, if you like what you hear on these episodes, give us a review, give us a subscribe. That way it pushes our search results higher, gets us more audience, and makes it so we have more of a listening presence, and it could get us some reputation. Because here's the thing, my listeners, you're not just an audience to me, you're a part of the show. I see your comments, I see the different messages I get from you guys, and I cannot tell you how much I appreciate all the feedback I get from you guys. I do this for myself to have fun, and now it's blossomed into something else. I'm doing this now because I love hearing your comments and knowing that I'm bringing some happiness and enjoyment to my listeners. So thank you so much for that. Please continue with the reviews and subscribes. Our pro wrestling plug for this week, Chikara Wrestling Factory, 4711 Wingate Street, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. If you are somebody who's looking to someday make it into the world wrestling entertainment or into pro wrestling in general, they specialize in lucha libre, purisu, European style wrestling, that's British and German styles, mixed martial arts, American pro wrestling, all mixed into their curriculum at the Wrestle Factory, which strives to create the most well-rounded performers active today. That's all the time we have for this episode, but check back with us in the next episode where we're going to cover all the happenings in the world of wrestling. We'll keep you posted on all the behind-the-scenes information. As always, special thanks to bensound.com and purpleplanet.com for producing all our music and sound effects throughout today's show. Today's podcast is sponsored in part by Beazle Games. Bringing a new friend to family game night is easy with sketchy people. Showcase your artistic side with this new game from Beazle Games and bring some fun and excitement back to family game night. Go to www.thegamecrafter.com/sketchypeople to pick up your copy today. To AlleyRepair.com. Contact Alley Repair today for servicing of all your classic skee-ball, pinball, and arcade needs. We want to thank you for listening to today's podcast. We encourage you to go to our website at www.frolifeplanning.com to learn more about what Mr. Fro can do for you. Remember, Fro Life Educational Planning is for today, for tomorrow, and for life with Fro Life. I'm Fred Froelich, better known as Mr. Fro, and I want to thank you for taking a few moments with us today, and we look forward to discussing more current events and rumors in our next show. That's all for now. Take care, everybody.